Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to have Stephan Ledain, the founder of Adapt AI, a consultancy that helps organizations navigate people-related challenges and adopt AI successfully. With a background in behavioral science and innovation consulting, Stephan has been instrumental in guiding companies through the complexities of AI integration. Stephan, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here.
Awesome. I'm super excited to dive in. I always like to start from the beginning. So take us back to before you started your company, Adapt AI. What was the motivation, the inspiration behind starting it, and what problems were you hoping to solve in the market?
Yeah, I've always been encouraged by and energized by the idea of evolving the practice of applied psychology, basically,
Mm,
because I think the more ubiquitous and accessible we make these sort of insights, the better the world is in general. And being or placing our practice in the context of the organization, there's just so many opportunities to penetrate further and use this research and these theories to help improve people's lives at work. And when I graduated and came out of grad school, I had a rare and serendipitous opportunity to help a talent management consulting firm that was looking to bake in more technology into its operational processes and certainly into its client delivery systems. And they actually, at the time, lost the deal with a technology vendor. And so I happened to fall in at the right time where they needed someone to lead a product development journey. And so from that experience, I started building my career on the three principles of really compelling cutting edge psychological insight, data science, and technology development.
mm,
And because of that, I had this, again, rare opportunity to apply what we do in a unique and scalable way. And since that, I've done very similar projects and had a very similar remit at other organizations, competitors, and more boutique consulting firms that specialize in things like leadership. But I realized that however excited and inspired I was by my work, I wasn't able to do the very fundamental thing that I sought out to do, which was to actually influence and bake in and internalize the tools that we are building because there's simply no process or system to do. And so I realized that there's two parts to innovation. It's a two-pronged process, which is you need to build the tech and tools and processes to innovate, but you also need to know how to adopt and implement and integrate them into a environment that is mostly based in people, and people have their own ideas and mindsets and experiences that either accelerate or resist new tech and innovation. And so
yeah,
you have to have a firm lens and methodology to address both, basically.
got it. Got it. Wow. I appreciate you breaking that down because it gives us a history in your background, kind of your passions, and help us understand one of the things you said at the beginning is the power of taking some of these concepts in applied psychology and bringing them into the workplace. Can you break down maybe a concept or two that you feel like is very powerful that people could use and implement and adopt to increase efficiency, to just make their workplace much better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things we tend to leverage at Adapt AI and is underappreciated lens in general is the social identity approach to organizations, which basically suggests that we find ourselves connected or engaged or inspired by work that feels like it's aligned to the person or the self that we think we are. So an
Mm,
example would be if you work for a legacy, more traditional firm and you see yourself as a maverick or an early adopter or a tech-based person, you'll feel the sense of misalignment.
Mhm.
And because of that, you won't be as engaged as you would like or need to be a fully productive person. And I think if we spent a little bit more time giving people the opportunity to identify with who they are and in connection to the work that they do, you'll see vast improvements and results for both the individual and the company.
I love that. I love that. So basically tying the mission with their own self-identity of who they see themselves to be. So then they're going to be a lot more bought in to the work that they're actually doing.
That's exactly right. And this is not just a social or moral case. There's a lot of research and a long-standing body of research that suggests that employees that are more aligned and engaged or identify with an organization just produce more
Yep.
and stay longer and do productive workplace habits in general.
Yeah, I love that. Let's shift over a little bit to the business aspect of it. To our listeners who know nothing about your company, can you help us understand who is your core ICP, who you love to work with, and what are the offers and services that you provide?
Absolutely. So we're dealing with or looking to work with the title that probably has the greatest amount of pressure and difficulty getting their work done in this day and age, which is the CTO of a larger to mid-size corporation who needs to navigate and create a roadmap for the future of the organization that they're in. And typically they find themselves situated in traditional businesses that have grown and established themselves with ways of working and a business model of the past 50 to 100 years that they're realizing is no longer that relevant given the advent of really game-changing technology like AI. And
Mm,
we want to see them as they are in their difficult situation because oftentimes they're set up for failure simply. And we want to give them a really simple, data driven, evidence based roadmap for getting from 0 to 1 on their AI adoption journey and
mm.
removing all the confusion by doing that.
Got it. So let's say I'm a CTO of one of these larger to mid-sized corporations. What does it look like practically speaking, when it comes to our client engagement, when it comes to us working together? Walk me through that process from they signed on, they're ready to move forward, and then the end of that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always start with an assessment of sorts. We have a automated short form AI readiness assessment, which you could scale to any sort of major tech evolution assessment. And really what we do is we take inventory of two things, the tech landscape and tech stack, and around that the governance and processes that support technology. But then we also take inventory of the sentiment and again the identity of people and the relationship to technology in the firm. And we give you a starting block for what sort of areas need attention if you were to start a successful tech transformation journey. And from there, we think about what are the available tools, the proprietary tools that we have baked into our system that are most appropriate for getting you to where you want to go. So an example of that would be how you can make a decision between build internally or buy, which is a huge crossroads for a lot of CTOs. Another one would be how can you effectively vet vendors so that they're situated and appropriate for the work you're trying to do. And all this is underpinned by behavioral science. And so we think a lot about how do we actually leverage your current workforce and maybe look to expand that so that all this tech transformation work becomes deeply embedded into the organization and set up for success.
I like the behavioral science piece because not only is it a differentiator from a business perspective, but it's also powerful. Like it's there for a reason, right? There's a whole field of study dedicated to this. So what does a typical client engagement look like? So if we're working together, how long typically are we working together? And is this like we're having a weekly check-ins, we're having monthly check-ins. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really depends on the scope because each organization, each group, each leadership team has a very different palette or sensibility towards tech adoption, although all of them have that on their strategic roadmap right now. But a typical engagement looks like we spend 2 weeks or so gathering the right information, and that includes the AI readiness assessment, but that also will have stakeholder and focus group information and insight gathering, and just really taking great pains and time to understand your organization and the problem that you're facing, like what is standing in the way between you and success. Then we take about another couple weeks to set about the right toolkit to get you to where you're going. And through that journey, we pull again from our proprietary options, though we also think about within our network of related organizations who might be the right sort of support mechanism to get you to where you're going. An example could be if you need cloud-based architecture, we have a referral group that can help you get from zero to fully integrated into the cloud. And so we do that for the next couple of weeks. And then the follow-on period, which could take from a month to 3 months, is implementation. And in that process, we concurrently set up your tech stack and architecture while thinking about the change management journey, which could involve doing proper stakeholder analysis,
Yeah.
comm strategies, thinking about how we can do upskilling, learning and development, coaching, the whole suite of talent management options, so that by the end of the journey, your people feel emboldened and able to get started on using the tech effectively. Then throughout this whole process, we think about the important key indices that we can draw out that will measure what success looks like based on what you need. And we don't use just generic metrics that we could say are KPIs across the board. We actually think specifically within your context, how can we measure success? And then at the end of that, we give you a report, which oftentimes the CTO can present to a board or to the other executive team about how effective and efficient and often ethical the AI or tech transformation that they're doing is actually. So it becomes a very tangible, clearly articulated value prop at the end of all this.
Got it. So they can take that to their stakeholders and they can decide on implementation. Is that what I'm understanding?
Well, going back to actually the first point, which is we realize the conundrum that a lot of CTOs have, which is they spend a lot of money and they don't usually show a lot of ROI quickly.
Yeah,
And so we're trying to get them to, I'm
I see.
spending money and showing ROI and showing
Yeah,
how we've grown this practice as quickly as within a year.
I like that because you're addressing a pain point for the CTO themselves, which is if they don't show the ROI, what's stopping the company from just replacing them? And you go, and that's something that people think about is, hey, what's job security, all this different stuff. Help us understand. Okay, so now we have an understanding of who you help, how you help them, how long you work with them. How are you actually generating leads? What does the lead generation process look like for these CTOs that you work with?
Yeah, so we first started off with our network who we realized were in similar parallel universes from my background in leading innovation and product development within legacy firms. Because if there's one thing that we could rest assured is that everyone was having the same sort of obstacle or barrier to execution. And from there, we look to expand and get referrals, which got us our original pipeline. And with that, we wanted to take an experimental approach where we price down so that we could get more feedback and information
Mm.
from the initial customer base. And now that we feel like we have a better go-to-market or a clearer reality for what is actually needed or useful, now we're looking to take on more conventional means by cold outreach or networking or putting out social media content, for example.
Got it. So that still is something that you're going to implement in the future?
Yeah, we definitely want to scale that up quite a bit over the next quarter or so, which is getting our thought leadership out there. As you say, the intersection of implementation and behavioral science is somewhat unique. And
Yep.
we realize that warrants an education piece. But fortunately for us, because so many people live through this resistance, once they come across our point of view, it becomes quite intuitive that this is the right way of approaching a solution. And so our intention for the next little while is to just make sure we have more content available to the eyes of people who might benefit from this sort of service.
Got it. When you think about the go-to-market strategy, do you have any practical or tactical like steps that you're going to follow when it comes to, okay, we're going to do this first and we're going to do this first on this channel with the, do you have any of that or?
Yeah, we do. I do think we need to spend a lot more time refining that, learning from experts, drawing from support. But what we really want to do is start the classic strategy of starting with the long form content, which could be like a research or scholarly article, for example, and break that down into bite-sized, more accessible content, whether that is blogs or podcasts or short videos or infographics, whatever that might be, because we really want to draw from, again, our science-based, concrete, data-driven approach, but not to make it feel alienating to someone who's just browsing on the internet. And so we're trying to start big and then cut down into more digestible pieces.
Got it. Yeah, and I like the point of speaking with experts and people that have already been there and done that. That's absolutely critical when it comes to any sort of business venture, really anything in life. You want to get better at sports, talk to a coach. You want to get better in the
Yeah.
gym, get a trainer type stuff. So that's very powerful. And we talk about the power of having a predictable lead generation mechanism very often on the podcast. Because a lot of people, they come in here and they'll say networking referrals, and those are great leads. But the problem is it's not predictable. It's very hard to
Hmm.
build a business when you have inconsistent marketing and inconsistent lead flow, because that is the lifeblood of the business at the end of the day, especially when you have the fulfillment dialed in. Now, I'm curious with the model that you have in the offer. It sounds like it's very customized depending on the person that you're working with. Is that the case? Is that accurate?
I'd say so. There are fundamental building blocks or milestones we want to achieve within every client context, but we take our research back toolkit and draw pieces that are specific to a client. And the example I could give is not every client is thinking about vetting or procuring vendors. And so they may not need our standards for finding the right vendor, but they might need our protocol for building the right data governance, for example. And so we have a suite of, we'll say, a handful and more of readily available tools that we tend to package for the appropriate client context that we're dealing with or speaking to at the time.
Got it. Okay, so it is customized in a sense, but the core essence of it is very similar. Like in terms of first principles approach, these are going to be the main things across the board, and then maybe little tweaks here and there depending on the person, their industry, their company, their organization, all that good stuff.
That's
Is that
exactly right.
accurate? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that because like from our experience, part of the problem that a lot of consulting firms run into is that they're trying to be everything for everyone and it's too customized and
Hmm.
stuff like that. It's nearly basically impossible to scale because you can only have so you're spending a lot of hours with each client and it's harder to bring on more people that you can serve in a better way by packaging it more effectively. In a sense.
Hmm.
So help us understand what does the sales process look like? I know you're still like the go-to-market strategy is in the future when it comes to the cold outreach to social media. But so far from the networking, the referrals, typically, what does the sales process look like from a lead comes in, they raise their hand, hey, I'm interested in this, and then to a closed engagement? What are the steps in that process?
Yeah, so we first I'll say this because I think it warrants repeating is that consulting, especially this sort of consulting, is a long sales process. It takes a lot of time to build the trust of a really busy department in the organization and a department that needs a lot of credibility to move forward with a deal or to sign a vendor. And so we expect a long sales cycle of really doing the proper due diligence of getting to know our potential clients. And from there, what we do is we try to give them the most amount of value in the least amount of time, which usually looks like a consultation where we give them a high level roadmap of what they need to do, or a report or outcome from the AI readiness assessment, for example. And then from there, we think about solution architecting, like really tailoring what they might need based on all the above things we discussed. And that process then gets more into the meat and grits of the sales cycle, which is how do we actually think about pricing and timelines and stakeholder management and understand what it means to get this done feasibly. And that's when we start putting out our an SOW or more formal proposal, for example. And that period actually often takes a fair bit of negotiating because
Yeah.
this CTO, for example, in theory may want these things done, but in practice may realize that they're dealing with a really specific reality. And so
And
that's
they're not the ones cutting the checks.
yeah, they need to go back to their executive team or to their board to ask for the money.
For
And that's when we finally get to our proper like statement of terms and what we're looking to deliver, which usually looks like a quick transformation or a longer term transformation, depending on what their needs actually are. And from there, we think about how we can expand and scale that work within their context.
sure. I'm curious if you've thought about this. And the reason that I bring this up is because I've talked to other consulting companies and we've worked with other consulting companies that have done something similar to what I'm about to say, and it's been very effective for their growth. Because like you said, working with these larger organizations, the sales process is much longer. And sure, along the process you can be like, okay, this has a 90% chance of closing, this has a 70% chance, 60%, but you never know if a wrench is going to get thrown into the deal. So what I've seen is that people would create another offering that's tailored to smaller companies, that's maybe a little cheaper than what the larger organizations would go through, and it's more productized than what the larger organizations would go through. And those sales cycles are one, two call closes. So it's just a different offering. Have you thought about potentially setting up something like that? Because let's say you have a long sales cycle where it takes a couple months. In the process, you could be doing other smaller deals. Is that something that you're thinking about, or are you completely opposed to it?
I think it's a brilliant line of thinking. And as a product person working for consulting firms, this has been a foremost thought in the back of my mind. And we haven't actually properly shared this publicly, so this is a exclusive for this podcast. We've been in development of a platform that automates a lot of the processes that we typically lend to our consulting.
Cool.
So an example is you'd sign into the platform, you take the assessments, you'd learn about your current state, and you'd get to plug and play and gain access to the right toolkits that can service your needs. And from there, you also can bake in the right metrics to measure how well you're doing on the key indices that we're looking to measure. And you get online dashboarding, real time reporting of how much uptake and adoption you're getting and how that sentiment is changing over time. And basically we remove any high touch elements from the process. And so the opportunity and why it's affordable is that you have this rich insight and this rich structure for how to get done what you want to get done available for you online. The limitation is you don't have someone holding your hand
Mm,
or properly understanding your context to guide you through it. And so if you want to extend that and make it more of a white glove service, we can of course add that on later on, but you can get a lot of the work done, especially if you need the resources and awareness for how to do that work just by going through the tool.
yeah, cool. So that's going to be like a monthly subscription. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Very cool. Yeah, it's just the concept of the value ladder. I don't know if you ever heard of that concept, but it's just that your customer goes on a journey. There's a ladder. It's like a staircase, actually. And as they pay more, they get more value. But at
Hmm.
each step, there's some value provided and it builds goodwill. So there's so many different benefits to that. Help us understand when you think about the future, because you're quite young, the company's young, it's exciting. You're in a very fast-moving space. And you think about the vision that you have over the next 12 months for the company. Where do you want to take it? Are there any targets that you're aiming towards? What are your top priorities? Paint us that picture.
Yeah, this might be a counterintuitive roadmap or strategy, but what I really want to do is improve our ability to delight clients. And what
Mm,
that usually looks is having a really rich, seasoned, friendly, kind group of supporting consultants that really understand the problems that these organizations face and are
mhm.
really willing to embed themselves in their context and make them feel like they're super valued.
Yeah,
And I want to be able to bring the business to a point where we're healthy enough that we can have these consultants available, readily available, and full time. And I, from there, know we'll have to think about proper technology investment and marketing investment. But I want it so that the product is so irresistible and so beneficial and feels so impact with value that a referral or an extension of the contract is a no-brainer. And I do think consulting as a practice is changing a lot and will continue to change in the next year to 5 years, maybe even sooner than that. But I do think that exceptional consultants who really have amazing presence in the room, who understand the modern challenges that organizations face and can leverage technology, are going to be the founding blocks of the best companies in the future. And
mm,
so that will be my focus over the next year, just to build a pathway so that we can do more of that.
I love that. I love that. So building the boat in a sense where you can have amazing people rowing alongside you.
That's exactly right.
What do you feel like is the biggest challenge you're facing right now as the founder of this organization?
I think it's probably the typical challenges, which is knowing what to spend time on, where and when in a limited 24 hours.
Yep.
And in the balance of me being obsessed with exceptional client delivery and also the reality of needing to create this pipeline into the future of new business
Yep.
and knowing how to divide my time accordingly. And so I try to seek and lean on mentors to give me the objectivity to make the right decision and my readily available resources to make some of these trade-offs. But I do experience a challenge of that every day with just knowing what is the best way for me to spend my time today.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you being open and honest with that because that is a very stark reality of entrepreneurship. AI helps you be more productive, which is nice nowadays. So you can cut the time it takes to get tasks done. But let's go into a closing lightning round and I'll rattle off some questions at you and just the first thing that comes to mind. What's one tool or resource that's been a game changer for you so far in your company?
I don't want to say the cliche answers of LLMs, but what I will say is learning how to get good engineer work done through LLMs
Mm,
specific. So what the kids call vibe coding, but building, not seeing applications as this thing that you need to source from outside the organization, but seeing applications as something you can bake in. One of the principles I've pushed in my career and have set this company on was we either draw from a template or we build a template. And we can amplify that now to say we either draw from an app that automates things or we build an automation. And so vibe coding with one of these LLMs so that we have more of that automation has been absolutely game changing.
I don't really understand what vibe coding is. Can
I,
that tell me super quickly?
yeah, there's different definitions in different spaces, but it's basically working alongside a LLM, we'll call it, or an agentic AI tool to bring forward and manifest a feature or requirement for a technology while it produces the code alongside your ideation. So it's basically this ongoing conversation of you externalizing your idea or vision for a tool while it creates the code for it, and you tweak and alter and evolve the code in real time. And so a lot of tools now have this feature called Canvas. Like I think ChatGPT has it, Gemini has it, and I believe Claude has it as well, where you can set up a coding environment within the tool and talk back and forth with it.
Cool. Very cool. Might have to check that out.
Yeah, believe it, you have a really rich engineering environment available to you today, even if you've never studied a day of engineering, which is really groundbreaking if you think about what apps and tools can do for you.
100%. It's very exciting. What's the best piece of advice you've received about scaling your company?
It's mostly never scale for the sake of scaling and do it out of necessity or do it for to strengthen the heart of the business, but don't have scale for the sake of scale as a part of your ambition or goals because we, especially in North America and in this era of business, post the tech industrial boom, think that bigger, better, more users, more customers is a sign of a good, healthy business. And you can easily be destroyed by growth that's too fast as much as you can be just destroyed by growth that's too slow. And not to onboard more problems than you need is to really put scale into context and only do it if absolutely necessary.
Got it. What's one tip you would give your younger self if you could go back in time and talk to your younger self when you were just starting out and you could tell yourself something you wish you knew at that time that would have been a game changer? What would that thing be?
I'd say it's more of a marathon than a sprint. Everything is. So take your time, but the ultimate metric is learning,
Mm,
and any other metric is usually vanity. And so to get over the hunger or need for simple ambition like money or status and think about how much learning you can take from an experience.
I love it. I love it. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can email me at my name, Stephan, Stephan, at youhavetoadapt.com, or you can reach me on LinkedIn at my name, Stephan Ledain, or just Google me and find me at my website at stephanledain.com.
I love that domain, by the way. You have to adapt.com. Fire.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
So that wraps up another insightful episode of Founders Future. I want to thank you so much, Stefan, for sharing your journey and your insights with us today. For our listeners, if you are inspired by today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're looking to scale your business and enhance your sales and marketing efforts, visit closers.io to discover how we can support your growth journey. Until then, keep on climbing.